Hi, I'm Carrie Rollwagen, host of The Localist. What you're about to hear is a live recording from one of our Localist Lab events. This is when we bring in experts to talk about practical insights on marketing for small businesses. This session was recorded in front of a live audience, so you may hear some room noise and some shuffling around during the Q&A, but hopefully that just makes you feel more like you were actually there. For more background on the speaker or to view slides from the event, check out our show notes, or you can also grab a ticket there to our next event. I hope you enjoy this conversation. I'm Carrie Rollwagen. I'm host of the Localist podcast and author of the Localist book. And on the Localist podcast, we profile small business owners and hear their stories. And here at Localist Lab, we kind of dig into kind of specific topics, and we bring in people who can really speak to those topics to help small businesses. So that's what we do here. We are sponsored by the really Lavoie family of companies. So that's Infomedia, Uptick Marketing, Infomedia Studios, and Tempo. So between all of our companies, we really service digital strategy needs. So whether or not you have a large company and want to build a really big, robust website to do a lot of things, or you have a startup and you need a quick website, or you have digital marketing needs for really any size company, or content, video, photography, anything like that, we help you out. So if you see anybody with the Infomedia name tag or the Uptick name tag, afterward, just kind of ask how we can maybe help and work together. We are also sponsored by Lady Bird Taco. I know that's why the staff comes, so and I really appreciate them too. So we like that. So today's topic is a practical guide to part-time help, and we're going to be talking about virtual assistants and AI tools. And I'm the speaker today, so this is a little weird for me because usually I introduce somebody and I get to sit down, but not today. This topic, we decided to do this topic actually because you guys asked us for it. So last year we had a different event series, and we talked about how we got through the gap when our marketing manager left and we still needed to post on social media. And one of the ways we did that was we hired a VA for social media. And like 5 people came up to me after the talk and said, like, can you please do a talk on this, because I've heard about it and I have no idea how to do it. So we do listen when you have ideas. But another reason that I found a VA in the first place is really just because I was personally overwhelmed. So I'm a VP at Infomedia. I also consult for our sister companies. I also do a lot of speaking events like this one, but other ones. And then there's the podcast, there's the event. My husband owns a business, Jiu-Jitsu, and then last year we actually bought into a professional sports jiu-jitsu group, so go Twisters, Alabama Twisters. All of these are really fun. Obviously have an issue with saying no to things, but it was just really stacking up and getting to be too much. And the flashpoint for me was really my calendar. So my calendar was just this incredible work of genius, kind of. Like at any moment, really 75 different people could be booking stuff on my calendar. So I would like arrange it perfectly, and then every week 1 or 2 people would say like, oh hey, I can't make it today, can you give me some other options? And when that happened, like every nerve in my body would just feel like fried. I'm like, of course I cannot give you more options, but that's not the proper way to respond. So I was really overreacting, like maybe not to the person, but inside, to like a pretty normal request. And for me, that flashpoint was the calendar. For you, it might be email, like you might just be like buried under that. It might be that you can't get through the approvals you need to get. There are a lot of different reasons. And I needed help, but we weren't going to hire a full-time assistant for me. Like, it's not the Devil Wears Prada. There's probably enough for the assistant to do, but we have other priorities at work. So we hired a virtual assistant. So this is Hannah, this is my assistant. She is a real person. So that is something that I think is a bit kind of a misnomer with the term virtual assistant, is people think they're bots. And there are AI assistant bots. which we'll talk about a little bit. But when we're talking about virtual assistant, we're talking about a real person. So Hannah has 3 kids. She was a former business owner, which is very helpful in the work she does with me. And she's really helped out so much that at Infomedia and Uptick, we've brought on additional virtual assistants to help other people who are pretty overwhelmed, but who we can't really, it wouldn't make sense to budget for bringing on like a full-time person. So between the 2 companies, we use virtual assistants for a few different things. Executive or personal assistants, which is what Hannah does for me. We also have a VA who does our social media posting. We have a VA who does our podcast management. That's also Hannah, actually, so she does double duty. And then we also use like some light bookkeeping help and some help with sales. So you can have somebody who is like a generalist, or you can say like, I have a problem in this specific area, and probably get somebody who can help you out there. Okay, so why would you hire a virtual assistant instead of a full-time hire? I will say if you have enough work for a full-time hire, that is the better way to go. Like, I don't think we should be using VAs as just like, well, I don't feel like paying for a full salary. If you have that much work, you probably need to hire a person. But a lot of times we don't have the work or we don't have the budget. So VAs are just fewer hours altogether. Like, a lot of VAs start at 5 hours a week. So even a part-time person is probably going to be 20 hours a week, so a VA is a little bit easier to bring on. Also, they're contract and not full-time. So if you've ever done anything with payroll, you know that like a 1099 staff member is easier than a W-2. Just a lot more paperwork and things like that, and a lot more onboarding and all of that. So that's a little bit simpler. And also, there's just a lower commitment level. So I really love Hannah, and I hope that she stays with us for like a long time. But if we were needing to cut her, I'm not cutting her entire source of income because she has like 4 other clients. So whereas if you bring on somebody full-time and you don't know if you have the budget yet, it's a nightmare in 3 months. It's definitely a nightmare for that person and for you also to be able to say like, we have to cut you because I didn't plan well. But for a VA, that's not ideal, but you're not cutting out their whole source of income. So it's been really good for us in that respect. Also, virtual assistants come, like, if you hire a good VA, they're already gonna know things like email management, calendar management, just how to act professional when you're managing somebody else's work life. So one of the things we ran into before is I would talk to people who were like, we think you need a VA, and they'd say like, great, I know like a really nice person from my neighborhood. And it's like, you might have a nice person from your neighborhood who's also certified to be a VA, but if you don't, then you onboard that person and you have to teach them like, welcome to Gmail, you know, like that's a lot to be teaching somebody, and if you're already at the point where you're overwhelmed, you probably don't have that. So Hannah was able to come in, know these systems already, and of course we tweaked things because we do things a little bit differently, but that was so much easier from the beginning. Okay, so how do you actually find a VA? This was what stopped me from doing this for a really long time. I knew VAs were a thing. I knew other people used them, but I didn't know how to hire or how much it cost. And the services we use, I'm gonna link in my newsletter. So this is the first of many newsletter promos. If you've been to my talks before, you know that. So I'll also have a QR code at the end. If you sign up for my newsletter, even if you're already signed up, you may wanna do this because I'll send an email that has links to all of the things I'm gonna talk about today. So the service that we use is called Virtual Savvy. So Virtual Savvy, like they're not sponsoring us or anything, so there are other services. These are just like what we've tried. It's actually a business that trains people to be a virtual assistant. So they're not taking a cut of anything if you hire through them. They're just, they get paid by people learning how to be a VA from them, and then they have a job board that only people trained by them can see. I heard the owner on a podcast, and that's why I used them. I did vet several other companies too, and they kind of, in the research that I did, they were kind of the top ones. A lot of people also hire VAs offshore. Like there's a huge VA movement in the Philippines. There are pros and cons to those. For our companies, it just made more sense to hire somebody, to basically hire in the States. So we use VA Savvy. Also, there are smaller groups. So through that group, Virtual Savvy, we got connected with a smaller group called Time Tailored. And they actually all trained in the virtual savvy like ecosystem, but it's a smaller thing. And it's nice for us to be connected to that company, because when we need to hire, we can either post in the large job board, or if we just need to hire quickly, we can reach out to Aaron, who owns Time Tailored, and say like, hey, we need somebody to do this, do you have a person? And so that makes it a little easier. So neither one is wrong. You can also find your own places to hire, but that's what we do. So when you're budgeting for a VA, you want to make sure you have at least like 5 hours a week of work. I've looked at about like 100 different resumes, portfolios, et cetera, for VAs. So this information is just coming from like the commonalities that I've found. So you can definitely have more work than that, but most people, if you just say like you have 2 hours, they're not necessarily going to want to take you on as a client. Now you might want to split that between a couple different people at your company, but typically you're looking at 5 hours. And then $35 to $40 an hour is usually what people charge. Now, obviously, you're going to pay more for the same kind of work than if you have a full-time person. That's true of almost any freelancer. They're going to get paid more because they're not working as many hours and they're not getting health insurance and things like that. So this is about where it is. And if you want somebody to specialize in like HubSpot or something like that, you're probably going to go more toward the top of that range, maybe a little more. Okay, so after you post your job, which when I posted on Virtual Savvy, I didn't realize I was posting a job because they just have a form and it makes a job post, which is very easy, but I thought I just filled out a form and then I got 40 resumes, so anyway, it worked. But after you get those resumes or those portfolios, you really want to make expectations clear even before you hire the person. So this is something that is so critical with a virtual assistant, or really with any assistant, and also with AI actually, but make your communication preferences clear from the beginning. So like I told Hannah, I try not to be a micromanager with the rest of my staff. I'm not sure I succeed, but I try not to. But with my assistant who's representing me, I am pretty picky. So I told her that from the beginning. And also I was like, whenever I communicate with you, I don't have time every single time I Slack you to be like really nice about it. I might just be very direct. So I was telling her before, this is how I prefer to communicate. It's also helpful to tell them like the format. So a lot of small business owners like to communicate over text message. I detest it. But a lot of people you're like moving around, going all over the place. So if that's the way you want to communicate, you need to tell the VA before you hire them and see if they're willing to do that. Most of the VAs I interviewed were like happy to do that. But for me, I told Hannah, I want to communicate over Slack. And I was like, I'm going to Slack you things in the moment to get them out of my brain. I know you're working 5 hours. You're not working all the time. When I Slack you, it doesn't mean like get on this right now. It just means now it's out of my brain and you'll get to it when you're back working. But just make sure you talk through those things. And beyond talking through them, have an agreement also. Like obviously for the size of like Infomedia and Uptake, we have a contract because that's the best thing to do. But even if you're like a solopreneur, freelancer, at least get things in writing so you have some kind of agreement. Then the things I would talk about there are how's the VA going to track their hours? How are they going to invoice? One of the benefits of hiring people who are already trained is that they all had an answer for this already, which was a big relief to me that I didn't have to design that. Now we tweaked it a little bit to make it work for our accounting system, but they already had a plan. Also make sure that they have a plan for protecting your confidential information. Now, at our companies, we don't have our VAs working on client work. We may have them inviting a client to a meeting, but we're not giving them access to our client work. So they aren't going to have a lot of that information, but we did actually go out and say, say I have you set up a meeting with a client. I don't want the VA going behind me to that client and saying like, hey, do you need a VA? Like, so we went ahead and said that at the beginning, like making those things clear. It seems obvious, but I figured it was easier at the beginning than it happening and having to go backwards. And then decide what happens, like how much notice you have to give or how much notice they have to give if you end the arrangement. And one thing Hannah and I do is that she writes up SOPs or like standard operating procedures for the things that she does for me, because I was really worried about that. I was like, am I going to hand everything over to you and then you're going to leave and then I'm worse off than I was before? So she kind of like writes a little playbook for the next person in case she does leave. Okay, so then you want to get your VA connected to everything that they need to be within your systems. At our companies, we typically will give them a company email. You don't have to do that. We think sometimes because they are inviting clients to meetings, it looks a little more professional, and then it's easier for them to access documents within like our Google Workspace. So that's why we do that. You don't have to. I would really strongly though recommend getting a password manager. So like 1Pass is what we use at Infomedia. LastPass is also a good one, but this way you can give, your VA will need a lot of passwords. The first week is like really annoying to get like 2-factor, multiplied by however many accounts you have. But it is less annoying if you can go through a password manager. It's also way more secure. It also means that you can cut off access to certain things. So at Infomedia, we have a vault in our 1Pass where we have any passwords our VAs might need to access, like my website or the Localist or things like that. But our client accounts are not in that vault, so they don't have access to all of our client information. So setting up something like this is not that expensive, and I think it really is helpful. And then also if your VA leaves, if you are controlling the email and the password manager, you can cut off that access. Now, of course, that's not perfect. They can save the passwords on their own. They can download those things. You shouldn't like completely rely on those, but it does make it like a little bit easier, a little bit safer. And then there were a few documents that I created for Hannah that you absolutely don't have to create, but this really did help us. And they are on the newsletter as well, like examples. So I named them silly things, but the first document was called the World of Carrie document. And this was just like a rundown of all the different things I am working on. So any business I'm consulting with, I was like, here's a little bit about that business. I put my mission statement. I put what I want to do long term, because writing is part of what I do now a little bit, but it's also part of my long-term strategy. So she needs to know that. So if it's like, why are you prioritizing doing a speaking event at the library? Well, this makes a little more sense when she sees like how I'm trying to build my career. So just that overview I think is helpful. I also made an important people document. So I just listed not everyone on staff, but the people I communicate with the most, and then also friends and family. And this was just for me, so I didn't have to explain, Russell is my husband, and Russell works at Infomedia, and Russell owns Own Jiu-Jitsu, and Russell owns Alabama Twisters, and they're not different people. And one of the things that we connect on is doing too many things. So this is helpful so that she didn't have to ask me a lot of this. Both of these things will work themselves out. So if you're like, I don't want to do this, you don't have to. They'll figure this out. But it was a little bit easier for us. Another thing she asked me to create, which has been helpful, is a list of lunch and coffee places where she can book meetings without asking me. I called it, the places I'll go because I like books. And I got very detailed because I'm a very controlling and anxious person. But I put like, this place is within 10 minutes of driving of work, or this place is across the street from work, and the same with home, and linked the restaurants, so that she knows if I have a meeting right before this meeting and right after this meeting, I'm probably going to get lunch at Batola because it's across from Infomedia, or I'm going to grab a coffee at Daysol because it's across the street. So she lives in Arkansas. She doesn't live here, so she doesn't know this stuff. So this has been really helpful so that I can just say, like, I want to meet them for coffee, and because she knows my calendar, she knows where I'm coming from, so she can set something up that makes sense for me. Okay, so what does Hannah actually do for me? She does a lot of Localist work. So she works on the podcast primarily. She invites and schedules the guests. She does the show notes. She posts to YouTube. She does a lot of behind the scenes. She also asks a million questions. Like Paul, one of our engineers, saw me in the hallway the other day, and he said, how many guests do we have on the podcast this afternoon? And I said, I don't know. Ask Hannah. And typically, I've worked on that podcast, but my schedule's kind of bananas, so like I don't remember, like, is it the podcast posting today? Is the podcast we're recording today? Like, what's going on? But Hannah knows, and it also helps the staff because they can ask her those questions even if I'm not available. For Infomedia, for me, mostly what she does is she'll take meeting notes that I have either with her or with staff and turn those into documents or turn those into deliverables. And I definitely review those things, but it's helpful to not have to create them in the first place. She also manages my calendar, so we've talked about that. And then I also do a lot with Google Tasks. Like, that's kind of how I keep my to-do list. So she can also add tasks for me. So like when she scheduled this event, she knew I was going to be speaking. She scheduled something a month before that said, like, you need to, do a draft of you need to do your outline. And then 2 weeks before, it was like, you need to do these slides. And a week before, it's like, have the creative director review the slides. So she already knows for tasks that happen all the time that she needs to add some, or events that happen all the time, to add some tasks. And then also she answers a lot of questions. And she also does some personal stuff. This is me at a Twisters event, and my birthday party invitation. That's also my personality. That's my real personality. So she's like booked a hotel for my mom. She books my doctor's appointments and my hair appointments, because again, those are part of the calendar, and it's way easier to have her do it than me. And then for my birthday party, I planned it, I guess, but I did connect her with the venue manager, and I was like, can you get all the details that we need? And she actually sent the invitations out. So this is something I would also talk about beforehand and make sure that your VA is willing to do some of this, like what are the lines there? And then if someone else is paying for your VA, also talk to them. So like I talked to my boss and was like, this is how much time I can have her do personal stuff. I can't have all of her time, like, schedule, she's not meal planning for me or whatever, although maybe she should. So that is how we use virtual assistants, but I also felt like this talk would be incomplete in this current time without talking about AI assistants as well. So I can't tell you how to build an AI bot, partially because it's a little creepy, but okay, whatever. But also just because I have Hannah, so I haven't done that. But I do use AI in a lot of assistant type of tasks, so I kind of wanted to address that. If you want to kind of use AI for your assistant, how would that work? So when it comes to calendaring, I think it's a little bit tricky, and it depends a lot on what you do. So if you have a really reactive calendar, which that is like the best word I can think of to describe mine is it's reactive. It's changing all of the time. I think AI may not be the best thing for you. But if you have a pretty standard task list, like say you're an engineer and like I need to get this done in one day and I have control over most of my time, then it can absolutely help you kind of sort those tasks. So I do think it depends. I did a lot of research on this because I thought maybe I'm just like being silly about this, but a lot of the things I found were like, no, AI isn't the best for like a business owner type of schedule that's changing all the time. It's typically better for people whose schedules are a little bit more static. But one thing you may try, really whichever, is using something like Calendly. So Calendly is not an AI. I'm sure they have used AI somehow because there's no piece of software that doesn't. But really, it is more just like something that you can give somebody a block of time that they can block within their, schedule stuff within your calendar. So that's a little of a way to automate it, but it's not exactly an AI way to automate it. All right, so I wanted to talk about some of the things that I do with AI, and you can kind of extrapolate how you could use this as your assistant. I won't spend too much time on creating boring documents because I think we all know that AI can do this. But I'm not writing job descriptions myself anymore. I wasn't in the first place. I was just Googling like 5 of them and putting the good things together. So things that I wasn't like putting creative work into before, now I will use AI to create that kind of thing. It also turns like scribbles and verbal conversations into documents. So this is the first iteration of this talk. I'm ancient, so I write things on index cards. And then I can move them around, and I like doing that. I like the tactile version. But AI has finally advanced to the point that it understands my handwriting. 2 years ago, it definitely did not. So I just took this picture, uploaded it into Claude, and was like, turn this into text, and then I could send it to Hannah, who built the slide deck. So that's like kind of a combo. AI can also build decks for you. I've had mixed results with that, so try it if you want to. I also have it convert a lot of text conversations, so I'll just record a voice memo. I actually use a service called otter.ai that transcribes things, and that has an app on your phone that you can just kind of speak into, and it'll have a transcription. I like it, but you could also just record a voice memo on your phone and transcribe it any way that you want. And then sometimes, obviously we can record meetings, but a lot of times I have in-person meetings with people, so in that case, I may record part of it as a voice memo and then transcribe it, then turn it into a document or deliverables. I do have a caveat. If you're recording a conversation, you should always tell somebody. And whether or not it's illegal, I don't think matters. You should tell somebody. But I use it a lot for that. I've also used it to organize my desktop. So how you could extrapolate this is just like any digital chaos. This you would need an agent. So like Claude Cowork is what I use, but you can use different things. I had the kind of desktop that was people were always like freaked out by when they saw it in a meeting. I actually just had a folder on my desktop that said "Relax, Paul," because Paul, who's our engineer, would get really stressed out. So before I had him see my computer, I just dragged everything into that folder. So that was my system before. But I had Cowork go and actually organize things into files. The desktop files, I didn't have it rename or change, I just had it organized. My screenshots, though, I did have it actually renamed. So I just like named them according to the topic. I gave it some topics, and it also found some topics to suggest. And then I said, find a couple keywords in the screenshot. And then this is what my screenshots look like now. They're in folders, they're nice. Did it do it perfectly? Absolutely not. But I couldn't find screenshots before anyway. So now I can find them a little better, and the date is still in there, so that's the only way I could find them before. I still have access to that, and now I have a little bit better system as well. I can also use AI to turn one podcast into dozens of different clips. So this is something that we've experimented with a little bit. Our team usually cuts a reel for me to promote the podcast, but they don't have time to go through the entire thing, so they'll usually do one really good reel. But I want to promote it more, so I can put the whole video into a system that cuts different clips. These are a couple of the Alabama Twisters, by the way. They're my most visually interesting podcast guests, so I use them a lot. So we're still experimenting with this, and the humans who cut these things definitely do a better job. This is just kind of like it gives me an idea of what might be good, and I have to do a lot of work on it after that, but it's still getting me to that point a little faster. Not everybody here has a podcast, probably, but if you don't, you can still turn one thing into a lot of different things using AI. So you could turn a blog post into a bunch of different social media posts, or if you're doing a speaking event or a webinar or something like that, you can turn it into additional content. I actually have a whole talk on this. This is turn one post into 10, which is not actually talking about AI. It's talking about how to do this as a person, but you can also use some of those tips for how to use AI. I would recommend either watching this or doing a little bit of research, because when people just take a blog post, don't prompt it, don't change their brand voice, and turn it into a bunch of stuff, it just sounds like AI, and it's not resonating with people anyway. So I definitely wouldn't say like just do that and hands off and just post it, but there are certain ways that you can make it not seem gross. So you do have to put work into this on the front end, but once you do that, you can kind of get kind of better results from that. And then I use it to optimize my life. My life is optimal. Don't worry about it. It's not. But these are just some personal things, like personal assistant stuff that I've done. There are a ton of these kinds of things that you can do, but I create packing lists for trips. I'm a very persnickety traveler, so I already had lists, but this will let me say, like, I'm going for 2 days, or I'm going for 10 days, and it kind of, like, adjusts the list, which is helpful. It can brainstorm trip itineraries. I say brainstorm instead of, like, some people are like, AI is my travel agent, but I will say when I've double-checked a lot of this stuff, it's, like, closed. So I think it's a good starting point, but I would definitely check that's correct for all of AI. I've used it for some like meal planning, party planning ideas, and then I used it to romanticize my workout, which is pretty lame, but it's really worked out well. I was just like, I hate this. And when you're doing any of these things, just remember, like, prompt it really heavily and really drill down in your pain points. Like, if I were telling a trainer, This is why I don't want to work out. I would be so ashamed to say, like, I'm just really lazy, I'm tired, and I'd rather be watching TV. Like, that's not what I would probably tell a person, but I would tell the AI that. Like, and then this is a hack that is creepy, so use it at your own risk, but I do it. Like, I will tell the AI, this is my Myers-Briggs type, this is my Enneagram, this is my DISC, and I'm like, create a plan for me that works with my personality. And it's pretty good at that because it's just aggregating content, and there are like a million blogs on there about like how an INTJ works out or whatever. So you typically get better results, but then the robots know about your personality, so pros and cons. Okay, so VA or AI or both, like what would work best for you? Kind of both is probably gonna be your answer if you go with the VA. So Hannah uses AI a lot. Like, she makes her 5 hours a week go really far. Like, it actually feels like she's working for me all of the time. And part of the reason is that she's using AI to do part of her job. So she'll record our meetings, turn them into deliverables, she'll fix what it got wrong, those kinds of things. But she's not just handwriting the notes all of the time. And things like generating show notes and stuff like that, she uses AI pretty heavily. So I would say the pros of using a VA would be they can respond to quick, incomplete communication. Like, if you saw half the Slacks that I sent to Hannah, you'd be like, how in the world did she figure out what you meant by that? And some of that is because she's been a business owner before, so she kind of gets like what I want, and some of it's just working together, and she figures out like what I mean when I say something else. I also think VAs are really good for communicating with large teams, because I communicate pretty differently with like my boss versus a department head versus part of the team. I try to be much nicer to the team and mean as possible to my boss. But I am like more short with it. You know, we just have a different communication style. So I think that it's helpful with her. Could you program an AI to do that? Sure, but it would take me a long time and I don't want to. So that's helpful. I also think that she is good at handling changing dynamics, so I'm not having to always like re-prompt and re-explain because my life is pretty, like, it changes a lot, so that is really helpful. But some of the cons are that it just may not be in your budget to hire an AI, so that is probably gonna be a big part of it. Also, they could leave, like an AI probably won't, depending on what happens in the Terminator-style future. But also, you need to act like a decent person when you're talking to a person. So if you really are so exhausted that you can't be kind at all, this may not be the best thing for you. So AI pros, AI is good at organizing a ton of data. Like, I would never have paid a human to go into my screenshots and look at them and find keywords and name them. It was not worth that, you know? But AI is good at that. It can also be good at organizing and calendaring if you have a very like set schedule already. And obviously, it's always available. So if you're working at 3 o'clock in the morning, it can also be working at 3 o'clock in the morning. But it does struggle some when requests are unclear. The more you work with it, the less it will do that. I asked Hannah what does her AI struggle with the most with me, and she was like, it doesn't understand sarcasm. So when I say like, oh yeah, let's totally give that project to that person, it totally gives that project to that person. And apparently I use it enough that it was worth mentioning. So it just nuances a little bit harder for it. And then just the human variables of like the different people you interact with can be pretty complex. And really, when it comes to AI, the quality of the output you get from it is going to be equal to the quality of the input that you give it. So if you don't have a ton of time to tell it everything that you're doing, the output won't be as good. Whereas a human, often, especially a VA who's trained for this, can kind of help you through that. So I think the right answer is really just what makes the most sense for you. And now is the time for questions and for me to plug the newsletter again. I send out a newsletter once a week, and it has like tips like this of a tip every week. And then this particular one will send links from what we talked about today. So do you have any questions? John? How would you describe the difference between a freelancer and a VA? So how would I describe the difference between a freelancer and a VA? I mean, a VA is a freelancer, so in some ways it's the same thing, but it would just be a freelancer who specializes in being an assistant. So if you use freelancers for your business, you're kind of set up well already because you probably have a system for how you pay freelancers. So you can kind of like fold them into that. I think that it gets a little murky when you're talking about like a social media VA, for example. Like, so Marissa, who does our social, she could easily just say like, I'm a freelance social media manager, and that would also be true. She does admin tasks for some of her other clients, not for us, but so that's a little bit why. So in some ways there isn't much of a difference. It's kind of a, like, just terminology thing. Luke?
How do you learn how to trust Hannah or any VA to like take over your email and respond to people in a way that you find acceptable?
So Luke's question, which makes sense because he's a writer, and so am I, is how do you trust your VA to respond to people in your email in the way that you find is acceptable? I mean, the short answer for me is I don't. Hannah doesn't send emails from my email, but that is because that wasn't a huge pain point for me, and so that's not something like we really trained on. So she will definitely send emails from her email to people who I work with, and I didn't get really granular on telling her what to do there just because I think they can see, like, this is Hannah. And normally she's emailing people, like, internally. I am a little more, I pay more attention when she's emailing people externally. And usually I'll write a template for that email. But I think how I would do it is using templates to say, like, this is what I want you to say. And that is very helpful because it's a lot easier to go in saying, like, here are 4 examples of emails I write all the time, and this is what I want included. That is easier than saying, like, I hate how you're doing this. We do have people who their VA is in their email, and I think that what we do there is if the email is really like a boilerplate email, like if it's just saying, I got this, I'm on it, then the VA knows, like, they can go ahead and respond to that. If they scheduled it, they have it in the thing, and it's nothing really personal, they respond to it. But if it's something that is more detailed, they just flag it, and the person who is managing that email goes in and does it themselves. All right. Okay, good. I've answered it all. This has been really helpful, and I do think it's kind of a good way to see, like, do I need a person in this role? You know, like, our marketing manager, we're working that out. Like, she's, you know, a 5-hour-a-week VA is not equal to a marketing manager. And going into that and acting like they should be is not going to help your company. It's not going to help that person. So you can kind of scale it back and then see, like, can I live with this? But then it is a kind of a way that you can test out too, like, are we ready for a full-time hire? Because if you're having to add more and more and more hours to your VA, it could be time to say, like, actually we need to bring on a person. But it's easier to do that when you know, like, we have consistently had this work. So, all right, thank you very much. You can also talk to me about your podcast. If you don't have a podcast, that's the best time to talk. So if you're interested in doing a podcast for you or your business, or you just want to come into our studio and record some clips for social, we do that. This is our studio. Again, this is the Alabama Twisters. So we record, you can record right where we record the Localist. So if you're interested in that, talk to me or anybody with the Infomedia name tag. And I also hope you will become a subscriber to the Localist podcast. We're going to share this event in a couple of weeks on the podcast. So if there's somebody that you think could use it, like a coworker or, you know, somebody who has a small business, you can find it to share there. And then next month, I'm really excited about our topic. Jana's so excited. She's in the front row. I'm just kidding. She doesn't like being attention, so I'm sorry. But we're going to be talking about writing with AI. So everybody is trying to write with AI, and then it comes across really bad. Like, somebody said to me yesterday, like, well, I just don't like AI writing. And I was like, I don't either. But you can use AI for things like organization and teaching AI your brand voice in certain things. And it depends. Like, we write the show notes for the Localist with AI, but those are not like creative output. output. It's just like, this is what happened. But I'm not going to write my newsletter with AI because I'm a writer and it's important to me to keep those distinct. So Jana's going to talk about really like practical ways in your, I think maybe some in your personal writing, but really in your business writing for how to organize it, how to use it without it just like taking over your whole brand voice. So it's going to be the third Thursday of next month, right back here. And thanks again to everyone, all these companies for having us. So thank you. Thank you so much for listening to this Localist Lab session. Again, if you'd like tickets to the event, check out the show notes. The tickets are free and we would love to see you there. And as always, whether you're buying from a local business or running one, remember that what you do makes our community stronger every day.